Okay. I am really excited about having our guest on. And, of course, he's Dr. Joseph Mercola. And he's done so many amazing things. I don't even know here with his bio where to start. But he reaches millions of people every week with his website and his organizations. And so I know he didn't like to toot his own horn, but in a couple minutes, Dr. Mercola, before we launch into all this key information, what's most important for folks to know about you who may not know who you are?
Well, I'm the founder of Mercola.com, which now currently is the third most visited health site in the world. We're right behind the National Institutes of Health and WebMD, and we just passed Mayo Clinic. So we're number 3 in the world, and gives us a platform to really educate people about the fraud and deception that's occurring from the drug industry and the food industry.
And you have made significant milestones in your mission to bring people practical solutions to their health problems. New York Times bestselling author Dr. Mercola was also involved in the 2009 Ultimate Wellness Game Changer by the Huffington Post and has been featured in Time Magazine, LA Times, CNN, Fox News, you name it. We're honored to have you with us. Again, Mercola, MERCOLA.com. And the reason you're the most respected of all the alternative health researchers, in my opinion, is because you just go off the real research, and there's so much to cover. But what can you say about, I mean, my view, I don't know if it's your view, but certainly from what I see on the ground, there is a collapse of confidence in the system. Everything we talked about last year about the H1N1 lowering your immunity, being dangerous, that's now mainstream news, British Medical Journal. I mean, there is a collapse of confidence in this corrupt system, and the establishment is responding in a lot of strange ways, but it does look like the dam has broken. What's your view on that?
Well, I think we're making progress. There still is a large contingency of the public who is still fooled and deceived by the very effective marketing tactics that these industry employ. I mean, they literally generate many tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in profit, and they're able to really hire the most sophisticated and clever marketers on the planet. So it's a really sophisticated system, and it's really difficult to break out of that mold. But once you yourself have an injury or the system fails you, then you're really seeking more sound, logical, rational alternatives that really don't rely on expensive and toxic approaches that could literally kill you.
And I see the statistics and the numbers of 300,000 dying from drug interactions, hundreds of thousands from infections. I mean, boy, I tell you, this mainline healthcare is one of the biggest killers out there, rivaling even automobile accidents. On your radar screen, what do you see as the biggest threats out there? Is it sodium fluoride in the water, bisphenol A, GMO, cell phone radiation? I mean, you cover it all. The stuff, as I said earlier, you were covering 10 years ago is now just all over the mainstream news.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure if there's anyone that sticks out. It's really a combination of them, but I think probably it's just the concept and the belief that the traditional model is the approach for healthcare challenges, and that is the relying on a drug. And we're bombarded on that, of course, from the media. They spend over $16 billion a year to do direct-to-consumer advertising on TV. And, you know, the United States is only one of 2 countries in the world that allows that, where it's even legal. So they've really manipulated the public to the belief system that this is the approach, because these drugs are almost universally going to cause some type of side effect, if not death. I mean, it's routine. I mean, Avandia has just killed 80,000 people. Before that, Vioxx killed 60,000. And these are the ones that we know that are really in the news. I mean, there's dozens of others that are less toxic. So, it's so much. It's choosing that system and that approach, and you're ignoring the basic practical strategies that one can use, which of course doesn't generate profit and revenue for these large industries. So I think it's a belief in that model that's the most dangerous threat. Yeah.
Well, I agree with you, and when I watch these drug ads, it's absurdist. It's like they're openly admitting this drug is probably going to kill you. Oh, you're having trouble sleeping, or you're having trouble, needing to urinate a lot. And they'll tell you 10 seconds how great it is, but then they say it may not be right for you, causes heart attacks, sudden death, brain damage. I mean, it's bizarre. and then ask your doctor about this drug. I mean, it's sometimes I'm pinching myself, wondering if I'm having a bad dream.
It almost seems that way, doesn't it, Alex? It really is. Because you go to any other country in the world, you're not going to see it on TV except for Australia. There's only 2 countries in the world that allow that.
Let's start.
And it really, you look at these, and it's been on for 15 years, but prior to 1995, those ads did not exist in the media. It was illegal. But then they lobbied Congress, and they were able to get permission to air those.
Meanwhile, they're always waging war against alternative medicine or even vitamins and minerals. Now they're demonizing, vitamin D. It just gets crazier and crazier.
Well, it wasn't so much a demonizing, but the Institute of Medicine came out with a report last week which really essentially ignored the stacks of new studies and research that that establish vitamin D as a very useful approach in over 2,000 diseases. And they only focused on bone health, which we've known about for about 100 years, and they ignored all the rest of the research, and virtually no vitamin D experts were on the panel. It was really a travesty. So, it's hard to nail a specific conspiracy, but there's some actually lawsuits against this recommendation because it's really deceiving the public and not allowing them to fully utilize this incredible resource, which is about one of the least expensive vitamins you can possibly purchase, and one that has probably the most significant impact on your health.
Sure, but I mean, by demonized, I was thinking of Dr. Dean Adele, who, I listened to him, and just almost everything he says is patently false, and he was just flipping out and saying that, it's bad to take most vitamins and that we don't need them. But then I look at all the studies about vitamin and mineral deficiency, and what a big problem it is. When we come back, I want to discuss a lot of the articles that are at Mercola.com. Pregnant women should minimize exposure to cell phones. I want to look at that. I want to look at all these reports of different chemicals that are in plastics that we are eating our foods out of, and what that's causing, ways that, from your research, are the best ways to detox, all the thyroid problems. We'll talk about it with Dr. Mercola. Going through the articles that I see you posting and that your great researchers are putting together that link to all the mainline medical studies that are out there. It's not just bisphenol A we've got to worry about. You've been reporting on the other chemicals that are in the liners of the wrappers around hamburgers and other things that are causing serious problems. Can you go over what bisphenol A and these other chemicals are and what the studies show they're doing?
Well, the article you're referring to, we posted last week, a study that came out that showed that these wrappers, which are usually put in place to prevent the grease and oils in the fast food from leaking out, as they would if you use regular paper, there's these sticky coatings, and you see some of it too also on the microwavable popcorn. So the way they're able to do that is really similar to how they achieve a nonstick surface, which is they put a fluorinated chemical compound, and this fluorine compound actually dissociates and it migrates into the food. So you're actually eating these compounds when you do that, and that's definitely not going to be
fluorine. That sounds like fluoride.
Yes, well, it's a fluoride compound. There's no question.
Well, they just love to give us fluoride, I guess, because they love us.
Well, it's a pretty useful chemical. It's a really interesting innovation to have a material that you can fry food with and not stick, but it does it at quite a price. I typically, when I'm lecturing, tell people if they have any non-stick finishes to either find a relative or a neighbor they don't like and give it to them, because the stuff is toxic as heck. But actually, it's not that toxic as long as you don't heat it. But the moment you heat it, you start to volatilize this fluoride, and it goes into a gas, and it can cause health problems. And it's so much so that if you're in an enclosed environment, you could actually kill pet birds. I mean, this stuff is really toxic. Oh,
I'm sure it's an accident they're doing this. Also, they report on the bisphenol A is in most, or 40%, and they said, 60% of the printer ink. So I guess I'm touching it right here, right now. I mean, this stuff is just everywhere.
Well, and it's sort of stealth, too. And when you go to the grocery store and you get these receipts, it's on those receipts. So, you want to really minimize your contact with those.
Now, the good news is, 4 states have passed laws to start restricting this, at least for children. They're pointing out that it's in the baby bottles, as, again, you did a decade ago plus. So we're starting to move in a good direction, but now we're finding out that this stuff is just everywhere.
It's pervasive. pervasive. There's no question it is. And aside from the bisphenol A, you have the phthalates, which is a chemical that's added in the manufacture of plastic to make it pliable. So any plastic that's flexible will have these phthalates in there. And that's another chemical that's loaded with complications, and that also should be banned.
Well, from my research, correct me if I'm wrong, a large percentage of petrochemical waste, in some cases up to 30% of crude oil they have to get rid of, and so they just created industries for the distillates, what was left, and that's where most of this stuff comes from. It's petrochemical leavings, and so they just put it into our food chain.
And they charge us a pretty price for it, too, just as very similar to what they've done with fluoride waste products, which is a common waste material in the manufacture of aluminum.
Well, I'm not the leading alternative health research director out there like you are, but I do talk to the public. I do see things in mainstream media. I hear women talking on radio. I hear women talking in grocery stores, women's magazines. I read them. It's got to be a third or more of the women, young women, are having thyroid problems. Their hair is falling out. Is that a cocktail of chemicals with this epidemic of women's hair falling out?
Well, there's two primary ones that are culprits, and they tend to be these halogens. It's important to understand that iodine is an important mineral that we need for thyroid function, but it's easily displaced by these other halogen chemicals or elements such as fluoride and also bromine. So fluoride is becoming pervasive, and clearly the most common source is in the water supply, but fluoridated toothpaste is also another issue. So when you're consuming that and you're consuming most bleached flours, it's bleached with bromine. So almost all the flour out there is brominated. So these bromine and fluoride ions displace the iodine from the thyroid, and as a result, you can't form thyroid hormone because that's what's part of the thyroid hormone is iodine. So that's the mechanism. Soy is also another pervasive one that's really there's a hormone in there called isoflavones, which actually act as a goitrogen and impair thyroid health. So the combination of these fluoride, bromides, and soy are probably the biggest culprits for
unbelievable. Stay there, Doctor. Long segment coming up. I want to continue going through this. So what do women and men and others who are losing all their hair, they're becoming obese, even though they're not eating a lot, I mean, how do you reverse this? And is there a way to clean it out? Well, we'll be right back, folks. Fluoride everywhere, and no clean food or water for us to drink. So, Dr. Mercola, you get the same intel that I'm receiving. I mean, they admit in the media that thyroid dysfunction's off the charts. Perhaps you can talk about those numbers, but just women everywhere, talk show hosts, you name it, young women. I hear them talking about it, and I see women all over the place. You can see their hair falling out. I mean, how much more obvious does this poisoned environment have to get? Please continue breaking that down.
Well, the bulk of the people that experience this are women. My guess is it's certainly the majority of women, but perhaps 75, 80% of women have some challenge with it. And if your listeners are interested in finding out if they have a problem, you can certainly go online, our website, or Google it and find out what the symptoms are. But there's a blood test you can take. It's called TSH, which is short for thyroid-stimulating hormone. And, of course, the normal conventional lab test normal ranges are off. But if your number comes back below 1.5, then it's okay. If it's above 1.5, it'll be most likely you have a problem. But you'll be told that you're okay if it's below 5. So there's this range where almost all the conventional doctors are misunderstanding and misinterpreting the results. So it's far more common than traditionally believed. So
what do? Get off these things that have the fluorines and fluorides in it. Stop using the non-stick. Stop drinking out of the bisphenol A. Stop drinking the fluoridated water. Stop bathing in it. I mean, are there ways to heal?
No fluoride toothpaste and, the flour. You can't have brominated flour. That's definitely
So no white flour, no bleached flour.
Right. It'll say brominated on it. So those, you have to stop the assaults to your body. That's one. But then the detoxification can be somewhat of a challenge. And, the key thing is if you have serious thyroid issues, most likely you're placed on a synthetic version of thyroid hormone, which is called most commonly Synthroid. Or levothyroid, but these are not the best. The best is a natural thyroid hormone, which is called typically armored thyroid or desiccated thyroid, which will solve the problem and allow you to start processed.
Is that the one that's from cows?
Yes, it's typically from cows, right? Or pigs. I think it's from pigs. It's porcine. It's from pigs. The most common one's from pigs, yeah.
I don't know. I just did some research and saw them promoting and selling desiccated cow thyroid, but I'm saying...
Yeah, I think that's a better one, but it's somewhat hard to find. Yes, the most armor thyroid is from pigs.
And I guess you go to a doctor or a clinic, and then they test your blood?
Those are prescription. Yeah, most of the time you're going to get the test through a licensed healthcare professional, and those specific supplements do have to be prescription, at least in the United States. Of course, you can be creative and go online and purchase these things overseas without a prescription.
And then the women start to see their hair come back from the research I've looked at. But you notice when you search these terms, you mainly find people that want to do hair restoration or they want to sell you minoxidil. They don't want to tell you, it's just like mainline medical science. They want to treat the illness instead of, or treat the symptoms instead of actually treating the underlying cause, correct?
That tends to be the common pattern, yes.
Boy, that is cold-blooded. So for all you women out there wondering why your hair is falling out at age 30, now you know. Are there any other causal things that people can knock out? From your research, I mean, how much of the women's hair comes back?
Well, it's variable. A good percentage of them will. And one of the other components that really is an important element, and really what I believe is the primary cause of obesity in this country, and it's clear and obvious that you walk down any urban area, city and you'll find that 2 out of 3 people are overweight. I mean, it's really massive epidemic that we're in, and it is relatively recent, and I believe is related to the manufacture of fructose from done cheaply when the scientists figured out how to do that in the mid-'70s, and it's just pervaded the food supply. So this fructose as a sugar is just absolutely horrendous.
Now let's talk about high fructose, because now they're running ads where the smart woman, because they know women buy about 80% of the products, it's always a woman telling a man off or telling another woman off that, oh, it's a conspiracy theory that high fructose is bad. Corn syrup is good for you. But then there's all these mainline studies with the diabetes and what it does to our metabolic systems. Dr. Mercola, break down what the high fructose is doing, why it's different from sugar.
Well, sugar or sucrose, which you can get from canes or beets, it used to be the common way that we got sugar in this country, is really similar. There's not a lot of difference between the two because simple sugar is 50% fructose and 50% glucose or dextrose. So from that perspective, it's a problem. And if you get high fructose corn syrup, it's about the same ratio. There are 2 differences. One is in high fructose corn syrup, it's a simple sugar and it's dissociated. It's not bonded together with the glucose. So it's absorbed a little more quickly. But the primary reason why it's such a problem is it's so darn cheap. And people, food manufacturers are putting it into everything, so the numbers are going through the roof of what people are consuming. At 1900, Alex, the average person only consumed about 15 grams of fructose, and that was mostly in the forms of fruits, healthy fruits. But now, about 25% of the population is consuming more than 135 grams a day, well more than 10 times what the average person was consuming a mere 100 years ago. So it has significant metabolic problems, and that. So if you have a challenge with your thyroid, or really any health problem, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, one of the most important things you can do is get off the fructose. And the most common, this is really a shock, and I'm sure many of your listeners realize this, but the most common source of calories in the United States, the most common source is fructose, typically in the form of soda. So that's a simple thing to eliminate, and once you get that out of your diet, then your health starts moving in the right direction. So you got to hit the basics. That's really essential.
Wow. Dr. Joseph Mercola is our guest, and we're going to tell you more about his website as we talk to him. I want to go to some calls here soon. It's at Mercola.com. Take control of your health. Just amazing research and information. More and more mainline studies are having to admit in the U.S. and Europe, as you know, that frequency pollution is a big problem. And that the studies are showing with pregnant women, you name it, it's really causing serious issues with the fetuses. From your wide spectrum research, give us your brief take on frequency pollution.
Well, these are definitely a challenge because we're going to explosion. Most people don't realize that cell phones are a relatively recent innovation before 25 years ago, they didn't exist anywhere in the world. And, I think it was in the mid-'90s or late '90s, we had 1 billion cell phones, and then we're up to 4 billion now. So this is a relatively recent exposure to this radiation. And just like smoking, I think that's really the most powerful, simple analogy. These exposures don't cause a problem acutely. In other words, it takes time to have this exposure before you're going to notice the difference. You don't get lung cancer after smoking one pack of cigarettes. It takes many years, if not decades, to have that exposure before you have a problem and a complication. So similarly, exposure to these cell phones, it's going to take 5, 10, 20, 30 years before you're going to see an increase in the consequences and the health problems. And the primary ones are going to be brain cancers. And we've already seen this today, but it's going to be exploding. It's going to be just like lung cancer exploded. We're going to see an explosion in brain cancers because of the use of these cell phone devices.
Well, it's being reported, again, like AP, Reuters, you name it, that they're already seeing that. And then you'll see the cell phone makers come out and say, well, we don't completely agree with that, and it's not conclusive. It sounds just like the cigarette makers, even a decade ago, saying, we didn't know this caused cancer. We're not even saying it does cause cancer. And you go back 50 years ago, they said, they had doctors on TV in lab coats going, having a sore throat? Smoke an extra merit.
Sure. And the telecommunications industry is a far bigger and more powerful industry than the tobacco industry. There's no comparison. I think it may be one order of magnitude larger. So they have a lot more income and power to play with and manipulate the perception.
What are some of the, there's so many things to talk about. What are some of the other things that are on your radar?
Well, I really believe that the reliance on drugs as a solution for health is a problem. One of the primary issues that we face, and the most significant concern, is that it's becoming progressively more expensive for the drug companies to actually have these drugs approved, and then even once they're approved, then they have to defend lawsuits, typically resulting in billions, if not tens of billions of dollars for the consequences of people taking them. So there's this gradual, because of those two elements, there's this gradual shift towards a model where they're not using drugs anymore. They're going to be using vaccines, which, because of legislation passed 25 years ago, they are exempted from any prosecution, and they're a lot easier to pass. So they're going to manipulate the whole system so that they're actually not voluntary, so that they become mandatory. So there's tens of billions of dollars of profit. There's this gradual shift. There's probably hundreds or more vaccines that are in the pipeline right now for targeting for our population, and that's definitely a concern.
I just learned something new. I know about all the new classes of vaccines that cure depression, and that's in quotes, or smoking, or cocaine, or anger, or vaccines that make you calm and not have anxiety anymore. And I go read the different patents. Most of them are literally genetically engineered viruses, or the equivalent of nanotech, that go in and destroy the neurons so that you can't even receive those different chemicals in your brain. This is the equivalent of a viral lobotomy. They have other types that create plaques, other types that then attack hormones. And I want you to speak to this, but I had never put two and two together. That's why they admit they're moving almost exclusively to vaccines, because that'll be the new delivery system via manipulation of your body, of pharmakeia, and they've got this body of law with the Vaccine Damage Fund and the national security angle. That is nightmarish. So what specifically can you say about them coming out and saying, look, we got a vaccine that will cure you being upset, but then it blocks your endorphins? This is scary.
Well, it's this immunity from prosecution that's the most concern, because they can really sell these things. And in the case of last year of the swine flu, which I think is, our site's been around for 12 years, but I think our most significant contribution is really being a primary catalyst for educating consumers that the vaccine was nonsense. And as a result of that, 70% of the U.S. public chose not to get the vaccine, despite the president coming out.
And you were vindicated, because everything you and many others talked about came out to be absolutely right and more.
Sure. The right is, it's so easy to predict these things, Alice. Especially with the flus, because all we have to do is look at Australia, which is literally 6 months ahead of us. And you look at their experience, and we're going to exactly replicate it. This is no mystery. This is not rocket
That's right. They had deaths. They had massive brain damage, all neurological.
And they didn't have the epidemics that they were projecting. So, I mean, you can predict these things 6 months in advance with virtually 100% accuracy. But they don't want you to understand that. So it's pretty simple stuff once you understand the basics.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Almost all flus start in the other hemisphere or in Asia, and so we really should always know what type of flu is coming around the bend, and any type of.
And the flu or any infectious disease, for the most part, is not something to be distressed about, because if you're following healthy lifestyles, and if you go to my site, just on the homepage, we've got a whole 40-page report on how you can, there's no charge for how you can optimize your lifestyles based on beginner, intermediate, or advanced models. And one of the most important things you can do is optimize your vitamin D levels. We touched on it earlier, but, I mean, if your vitamin D levels are normal or optimal, over 50 nanograms per milliliter, you're going to be resistant to the vast majority of infectious disease. And if you're cutting out the sugar and you're exercising, you're sleeping well, drinking clean water, staying away from toxins, it's virtually impossible to get sick. I mean, just don't get sick. So you don't forget about the vaccines. You don't have to worry about even any downtime, any coughs, colds, or flus when winter comes. And I can't tell you, it's just almost universal, the responses that we get from people who adopt these strategies and change their lifestyle, and they can experience this, relief from these infectious diseases.
But then going back to what happened last year, as you know, but I'd like you to speak to this, Dr. Mercola, they did Canadian studies and others that showed if you took the H1N1 vaccine, it lowered your immunity by 50% to the regular seasonal.
Yeah.
Quantify that from what Dr. Blaylock and others have said here, medical doctors, that basically your body gets overwhelmed, then it doesn't know how to respond to a real threat.
You're absolutely correct. If you get the swine flu, the studies have conclusively proven that it actually increases your risk for getting the regular seasonal flu. So what do you think they did in the United States, and I think in most other countries of the world, with the flu vaccine this year? They combined them both, and you don't have a choice. If you get one, you get the other. So it's beyond crazy what they're doing, but it makes perfect sense if you're one of the executives in the drug industry, because you're going to be reaping profits.
And obviously, they want a captive audience. They go lobby billions of dollars to your state and federal legislature, and more we're seeing the government attempt to try to force vaccines on people, and they're coming out with hundreds of new vaccines. As you pointed out, medicine is shifting over almost entirely to vaccines because of the liability protection. This is a nightmare, but at the same time, record low numbers of people took the flu shot. It's starting to the same thing this year. How do you see the system striking back? I mean, they want to make their hundreds of billions, and because of Mercola and Infowars.com and all the other great people out there, folks are waking up. What do you see the establishment doing?
I don't know. I don't really get into those projections too much, but they're going to come out. I mean, they're going to want to try. I think the immediate threat is they're going to make it mandatory, and we're partnering with one of the top pro-vaccine safety sites in the world, which is the National Vaccine Information Center, NVIC.org. And we're really developing a massive consumer awareness component where we're lobbying for people to get together in their own local communities and hit their state legislators. So we will prevent this from happening. But I think that's the next big battle, is to make sure right now that we don't shift to a mandatory vaccine system, because right now we have the freedom to choose not to get them, even though there are essentially the freedom is somewhat nullified if you have a child who's going to school, because they're going to prevent entry into most school systems unless you're vaccinated. But you can always homeschool, or you can go to a state that doesn't require it and has a philosophical exemption. So it's not as bad as it could be. That's for sure. If these mandatory vaccine laws get passed.
We're going to break here in a moment. We're going to come back and take a few calls for Dr. Joseph Mercola. But briefly, what are you seeing on the front of GMO crops, cross-species chimeras, like the GMO salmon, the move to not even let us know if it's GMO in the stores?
Well, it's a big issue. I think we're going to be very successful in that. We're partnering with Jeffrey Smith, who was just on Dr. Oz yesterday, and got a very favorable response. But it's just providing people, the consumers can make the choice here. If they can vote with their pocketbooks, once they understand the issue, they can actually choose not to purchase this. And just like they did in Europe, once their profits go down, the people who are the industries who are manufacturing this, they will choose not to. So we can easily defeat that without any legislation, without any governmental intervention. It's a really simple process.
Amazing. Dr. Mercola is our guest. Briefly, as we go to break, what are some of the other things that you're looking at right now?
Well, it's one of the most exciting ones. Fluoride is a big issue, and then also mercury, which is another toxin, of course. And we're working with Charlie Brown for the Consumers for Dental Choice to help outlaw mercury amalgams in the United States, which is one of our big projects.
So free humanity is on the march, but Big Pharma and their witch doctor cartels, they're striking back. I'm Alex Jones. This is the GCN Radio Network, GCNlive.com.